They called it helping family, but I knew the difference between a lifeline and a robbery. After my grandmother passed, my parents didn't mourn her. They calculated how quickly they could funnel my inheritance into my sister's bottomless debts. They relied on 20 years of guilt to make me comply, assuming I was still the quiet, dutiful daughter. Instead of a check, I gave them a single piece of paper that exposed every lie they had ever told. The phone call that changed my life came on a gray Tuesday afternoon. The kind of day where the sky over Wisconsin hangs low and heavy like a wet wool blanket. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a spreadsheet that refused to balance, trying to figure out which bill I could defer until next month without triggering a late fee. This was my life at 33. A small, rented condo with beige walls I wasn't allowed to paint, a car that made a rattling sound when I idled at stoplights, and a mountain of legal debt left over from a divorce that had stripped me down to the studs. I was the responsible one, the one who followed the rules, the one who kept her head down, and yet, I was the one counting quarters for laundry. When the screen lit up with a number I did not recognize, I almost let it go to voicemail. Creditors had stopped calling months ago, but the anxiety still pricked at my skin every time the phone rang. I answered it only because the area code was local to where my grandmother had lived. Sarah Russell, the voice on the other end said. It was a man, older, with the gravelly cadence of someone who spent his life reading contracts aloud. This is Arthur Hemlock. I am handling the estate of Margaret Russell. I felt the air leave my lungs. Grief is a strange thing. It waits in the corners of the room, quiet and dusty, until someone says a name, and then it rushes in to fill the space. Grandma had been gone for 2 weeks. The funeral was over. The flowers had wilted. I thought the sharpest part of the pain had passed, but hearing her name spoken in the past tense by a stranger brought it all back. She was the only one. I thought, the only one who ever looked at me and saw me. Not just a utility, not just a problem solver, but a person. Mr. Hemlock explained the process with professional detachment. There was a will, everything was in order, there would be a short administrative period, he said, but he wanted to inform me that I was a named beneficiary. I sat up straighter. I assumed, perhaps naively, that everything would go to my father. That was how our family worked. Resources flowed upward to the parents or sideways to my sister, Claire, but rarely did they settle with me. Your grandmother left specific instructions, Mr. Hemlock said. You are to receive a cash inheritance. After the final accounting, it should be distributed within the month. He gave me a ballpark figure. It was not a fortune. It was not the kind of money that buys private islands or retires you at 40. But as he spoke the number, I felt tears prick my eyes. Hot and sudden, it was enough. It was enough to pay off the lawyer who had handled my divorce. It was enough to kill the credit card debt I had accrued moving into this apartment. It was enough to put 6 months of living expenses into a savings account so I wouldn't have to panic every time the check engine light came on. It was freedom. Not a lot of freedom, but just enough to breathe. Thank you, I managed to say, my voice thick. I hung up the phone and put my head in my hands. For the first time in 3 years, the crushing weight on my chest lightened. I could start over. I could finally just be Sarah, without the asterisks of debt and failure attached to my name. Then, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from my mother. Lunch on Saturday. We need to talk about Grandma. The dread returned, instant and cold. They knew. The restaurant my parents chose was a supper club about 20 minutes outside of Milwaukee, the kind of place with dark wood paneling, cloth napkins, and a menu that hadn't changed since 1985. It was neutral ground, or so they liked to pretend. I arrived 5 minutes early. Punctuality was my armor. If I was late, I was chaotic. If I was on time, I was rigid. But if I was early, I was unassailable. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. The dark circles under my eyes practically permanent residents now, but I smoothed my hair and put on the face I wore for them. Pleasant, agreeable, durable, My parents, Robert and Linda, were already seated in a booth near the back. They looked exactly as they always did, well kept. Respectable, the picture of upper-middle-class stability. My father was reading the wine list, and my mother was adjusting her silverware. "Sarah, honey," my mother said as I approached. She stood halfway up to hug me, a gesture that felt more like a barrier check than an embrace. "You look thin. Are you eating?" "I am eating fine, Mom," I said, sliding into the booth opposite them. We ordered drinks. I asked for water. My father ordered a bottle of red wine, something expensive, and made a show of inspecting the label when the server brought it. "We miss her," my mother said, sighing dramatically as the server poured. "It is just so quiet at the house without her calling to check on the weather." I nodded, taking a sip of water. I missed her too. But I didn't share that with them. My grief was private because my relationship with Grandma had been private. To them, she was a mother and a mother-in-law, a figurehead. To me, she had been the only person who listened without interrupting to tell me how I could have done it better. We spoke about the service for a while, the flowers, the weather. It was a dance, a slow circling of the drain. I knew they were waiting for something. My parents never did anything without an agenda. They were transactional people disguised as sentimentalists. Finally, the appetizers arrived, and my father cleared his throat. "So," he said, setting down his glass, "we heard from Arthur Hemlock." I kept my face still. "I assumed you would. He tells us the estate is fairly simple." My father continued. "He has a very deliberate way of speaking, like he is explaining the world to a child. A few accounts, the house, the personal effects, and the bequests," my mother added. She looked at me, her eyes wide and pleading. "Sarah, we were surprised to hear she left a separate amount directly to you. I cut a piece of cheese from the appetizer platter. I was surprised too. I lied. It is a nice gesture," my father said. "Very generous." I waited. "But," my mother said, and there it was, the pivot. "But what I asked, well, honey, we are just looking at the whole picture," she said. "You know how hard this year has been for the family. The business has been slow for your father. The market is down. And then there is Claire." I put my fork down. "Claire. Of course. How is Claire?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. My sister was 2 years younger than me and lived a life that defied the laws of physics. She had no steady income, no career path, and a trail of broken leases. Yet she always had new clothes, the latest phone, and a story about how the world was conspiring against her. "She is struggling." "Sarah," my mother said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She has had such a hard time since that breakup. She is trying so hard to get back on her feet." I didn't say anything. I knew what trying to get back on her feet meant in Claire's language. It meant she had maxed out another credit card and needed a bailout. "She has a plan," my father said, leaning forward. "A real business opportunity. She just needs a little runway." I looked between them. They were a united front. They always were. "What does this have to do with me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. My mother reached across the table and touched my hand. Her skin was cool and dry. "Sarah, we were thinking, since you are doing okay, I mean, you have your job, you have the apartment, and Claire is really in a crisis. Maybe it would be best if we kept the inheritance in the family pot for now." The phrase made my stomach turn. The family pot. It was a mythical vessel that I was expected to contribute to but never allowed to draw from. "You want me to give my inheritance to Claire?" I said. I didn't phrase it as a question. "Not give," my father corrected quickly. "Invest. Help her stabilize. It is what Grandma would have wanted. She wanted us to take care of each other." I looked at my father. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my car insurance for the year. "Grandma left the money to me. Dad, if she wanted it in the family pot, she would have left it to you." My mother withdrew her hand. "Don't be difficult. Sarah, we are just talking about priorities. Claire is drowning. You are, well, you are you. You survive. You always do." It was meant as a compliment, but it landed like a curse. You survive. It was their justification for everything. because I could carry the weight. They assumed I should. I have debts too, I said quietly. The divorce, the legal fees. Those are manageable, my father said dismissively. You have a salary? Claire has nothing right now. She is looking at eviction. Sarah, do you want your sister on the street? The guilt was a physical thing, a heavy, wet heat in the room. They knew exactly where to press. They knew I prided myself on being the good one, the moral one. I am not saying I won't help, I said, retreating just an inch. I am just saying I need to think about it. The money hasn't even been distributed yet. We just want to have a plan in place, my father said. So when the check comes, we can handle it efficiently. Efficiency, that was another one of their words. Efficiency meant doing what they wanted without asking questions. Just then, the front door of the restaurant opened, and a gust of cold wind swept through the room. I looked up to see Claire breezing in. She was 45 minutes late. She was wearing a coat that looked like real fur, though I hoped for her sake it wasn't. And her hair was blown out in perfect, glossy waves. She looked like $1 million, which was ironic, considering she was apparently destitute. Sorry I'm late, she announced to the room at large, shedding her coat and sliding into the booth next to me. The traffic was a nightmare, and I had to stop for gas, and the pump was broken. She smelled like expensive vanilla perfume and stale cigarettes. She kissed my father on the cheek, squeezed my mother's hand, and then turned to me. Hi, sis, she said, flashing a smile that was dazzling and fragile all at once. You look serious. Are they grilling you? We were just talking about Grandma, my mother said softly. Claire's face crumbled instantly. A perfect performance. Oh, God, I miss her so much. I can't even look at her picture without crying. She grabbed a breadstick and took a bite. So, did you guys tell her? Tell me what I asked. About the help, Claire said, looking at me with wide, innocent eyes. Mom said you guys were going to figure out a way to float me for a few months. Just until the studio takes off. The studio, I asked? My father cleared his throat loudly. We can discuss the details later. Let's order lunch. But I wasn't letting it go. No. I said, what studio? Claire looked at our parents, then back at me. I'm starting a wellness brand. Mobile wellness. It is huge right now. I have a partner. A strategic partner. We just need the capital to secure the equipment. I looked at my parents. 5 minutes ago, she was facing eviction. Now she was launching a startup. I thought this was for rent. I said, It is, Claire said quickly. It is for everything. If I can launch the business, I can pay the rent. It is all connected. Sarah, I just need a chance. I promise. I will pay you back. As soon as the revenue hits, I looked at her. I saw the desperation under the makeup. She was vibrating with it. But I also saw the manipulation. She didn't want a loan. She wanted a grant. I can't commit to anything. Claire, I said, I have bills to pay too. Claire's smile faltered. But you're fine. You have that job at the logistics place. You have insurance. I have $30,000 in debt. Claire, I said, my voice rising slightly. From the divorce. Remember the divorce? Oh, that, she said, waving her hand as if I had mentioned a minor parking ticket. That was years ago. Isn't that guy gone? He is gone. I said, the bills are not. My mother sighed. A sharp, disappointed sound. Let's not argue about money at the table. It is vulgar. We ate in a tense silence. I pushed my food around my plate. The relief I had felt on the phone with Mr. Hemlock was evaporating, replaced by the familiar churning in my gut. They wanted it all. They didn't just want to help Claire. They wanted to strip me of my safety net to do it. After lunch, while our parents were arguing over the tip. Claire pulled me aside near the entrance. Look, she said, her voice low and hurried. I am serious. Sarah, I am in a hole. What kind of hole? I asked. A deep one. I owe people, not just credit cards. Who? I asked. She looked over her shoulder. Just people, vendors, for the business. You haven't even started the business, I said. I had to pay reservation fees, she hissed. Look, if I don't come up with the cash by the 1st, I lose my spot. And the investor meeting is next week. Investor meeting, I asked. You have an investor. She froze. Her eyes darted away. Not, I mean, potential investor. It is a pitch, but I need to show I have skin in the game. I need to show liquidity. Liquidity, I repeated. Since when did she use words like liquidity? Just think about it. Okay, she said, squeezing my arm. Her grip was tight, desperate. Please, for me. She let go and walked out to her car, a leased SUV that was 2 years newer than mine. I drove home in silence. The gray sky had turned to a drizzle, and my windshield wipers scraped back and forth, a metronome counting down the seconds of my patience. When I got inside my apartment, I didn't even take off my coat. I sat on the edge of my sofa and stared at the wall. They wanted the money, all of it. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Don't be selfish. Grandma would want you to help your sister. We are a family. We survive together. I stared at the words, don't be selfish. It was the mantra of my childhood. If I wanted to read instead of play with Claire, I was selfish. If I wanted to keep my babysitting money instead of buying pizza for everyone, I was selfish. I stood up and walked to the small bookshelf in the corner. I had a box there, a shoebox covered in floral paper where I kept the few things that mattered. I opened it and dug to the bottom. There was a birthday card there, the last one Grandma had given me before the dementia really took hold. It was a generic card, a picture of a sailboat, but her handwriting inside was sharp and clear. My dearest Sarah, you are the strong one. But even strong trees can break in the wind if they are too rigid. Bend, but do not break. And then, at the very bottom, a postscript I had glossed over at the time. Read everything. Don't let anyone rush you. I ran my thumb over the ink. Read everything. Why would she write that Grandma wasn't cryptic? She was practical. She balanced her checkbook to the penny. She kept receipts from 1992. Don't let anyone rush you. My parents were rushing me. They wanted a decision before the money even arrived. They wanted to keep it in the family pot. I took a deep breath. I needed to see the paperwork, not just the summary. Mr. Hemlock had given me over the phone. I needed to see the will. I picked up my phone and called my father. Hello? He answered on the first ring. Dad, it is Sarah. Did you change your mind? He asked immediately. I'm thinking about it, I said, keeping my voice steady, but I need to see the will first, and any letters or documents from the estate. There was a silence on the line, a heavy, loaded silence. Why, he asked. His tone had shifted from businesslike to sharp. Because I want to understand the terms, I said, if I am going to invest. I need to know exactly what I'm working with. You are making it legal. He spat. The warmth was gone entirely now. It is legal, Dad. It is a will. It is family, he shouted. Why do you always have to turn family into a transaction? We are trying to solve a problem, and you are acting like an auditor. My stomach dropped. That was the accusation they always hurled when I asked for accountability. Transaction. As if wanting to know where my money was going made me cold. I just want a copy. Dad, I'm going to call Mr. Hemlock on Monday and ask for it. You don't need to bother him, my father said quickly. I have the copies. I can explain anything you need to know. I would rather read it myself. I said, Sarah, you are being difficult. I am being thorough. Grandma told me to read everything. He went quiet again. When he spoke, his voice was low. You are hurting your mother. She is trying to keep this family together, and you are looking for loopholes. I am not looking for loopholes. I am looking for the truth. I hung up before he could say anything else. My hands were shaking. I put the phone down on the table and stared at it. I had never hung up on my father before. Monday morning. I took a half day off work. I didn't tell my parents. I drove to the address Mr. Hemlock had given me. His office was in a strip mall, sandwiched between a chiropractor and a vape shop. It didn't look like the kind of place that handled high-stakes litigation, but it was clean and orderly. Mr. Hemlock was older than he sounded on the phone. He wore a gray suit that was slightly too large for him and wire-rimmed glasses. He shook my hand firmly. "Ms. Russell," he said, "I wasn't expecting you in person. I wanted to pick up the documents myself." I said, "And I wanted to ask, is there anything else?" He sat down behind his desk and opened a file. He pulled out a thick stack of papers, the will, the inventory of assets, and then he hesitated. "There is a letter," he said, "a letter addressed to you," he said, "to be released upon distribution. However, given that you are here—" He slid a white envelope across the desk. It was sealed. On the front, in Grandma's shaky handwriting, was my name, Sarah. I reached for it. But he put a hand on the file. "There is one other thing. Ms. Russell. Yes, we received an inquiry last week from your parents." My heart hammered against my ribs. What kind of inquiry? They asked about reassignment. He said, "They wanted to know if they could sign a waiver on your behalf to redirect the funds directly to a trust account they control." I felt the blood drain from my face. They tried to divert the money, before I even knew it existed. "What did you tell them?" I whispered. "I told them that was impossible without your notarized signature and a formal meeting," he said. He looked at me over his glasses. "Ms. Russell, I got the impression they believed you were incapacitated, or at least unable to handle financial matters. They think I am selfish." I said, "Not incapacitated, just not compliant." He nodded slowly. "Be that as it may, the money is yours. Unless you sign it away, I won't." I said, "I won't sign anything." I took the documents and the letter. I didn't open the letter in the car. I couldn't. I felt like if I opened it, I would start crying and never stop. I drove home, checking my mirrors constantly, a paranoid habit I had picked up during the divorce. When I got inside, I locked the door and threw the deadbolt. I sat at my computer. I needed to know how deep this went. I logged into the county court portal. It was a public record system. Anyone could look up probate cases if they had the case number. I typed in Grandma's name. The file came up. Estate of Margaret Russell. I clicked on the Activity tab. It showed a log of document views. Most of them were recent, viewed by Attorney A. Hemlock. And then, 3 days ago, viewed by public user. IP address 192.168. I traced the timestamp. It was Thursday night, 2 days after Grandma died. Before Mr. Hemlock had even called me. Someone had been tracking the case. Someone knew the details of the will before I did. I couldn't prove it was my parents. It could have been a neighbor. It could have been a creditor. But I knew, in my gut, I knew. They had been watching the court records, waiting to see how much she left, calculating their share of money that wasn't theirs. I looked at the envelope on my desk. Sarah. I wasn't ready to open it. Not yet. I needed to be calm. I needed to be rational. I opened a fresh notebook. I uncapped a pen. My hand was steady now. The shaking had stopped. Replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I wrote 4 words on the first page. Will, letter, accounts, Claire's investor. I wasn't going to just say no. I was going to find out why they were so desperate. I was going to find out what family pot really meant, and I wasn't going to let them rush me. Grandma told me to read everything, so I would. I poured a glass of cheap wine and sat on the floor with the stack of papers Mr. Hemlock had given me. The legalese was dense, but I had learned to read contracts during my divorce. I knew how to look for the clauses that mattered. The will was standard, mostly. The house to my father, the car to Claire, the jewelry divided, but then the cash to my granddaughter, Sarah Russell. I leave the sum of $45,000 to be paid from the liquid assets of the estate. $45,000. I stared at the number. It was more than Mr. Hemlock had estimated on the phone. It was enough to wipe my debt and put $15,000 in the bank. It was security. And then a clause below it. This bequest is free and clear of any trust restrictions. Specifically, the Russell Family Trust dated August 12, 1998. The Russell Family Trust. I frowned. I knew we had a trust in the abstract sense my father liked to talk about trust assets, when he wanted to sound important, but I had never seen a date attached to it. 1998. I was 10 years old. Why would Grandma specifically exclude my inheritance from that trust, unless she knew that anything inside that trust was not safe? I picked up my pen and added a fifth item to my list: the Russell Family Trust, 1998. My phone buzzed again. It was Claire this time. A voice note. I played it. Her voice was thick, like she had been crying or drinking. "Sarah, please, I didn't mean to ambush you today. I'm just scared. Mom and Dad are breathing down my neck. And this guy, this investor, he's expecting the money. Just call me back. Please, don't be like this. Don't be like this. Don't be sensible. Don't be asking questions. Don't be Sarah." I didn't reply. I turned off my phone. I looked at the sealed envelope again. The letter from Grandma. I picked it up. The paper felt heavy. I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, the kind she used for her grocery lists. "My Sarah, if you are reading this, I am gone, and the sharks are swimming. I love your father, but he has a weakness for things he cannot afford. And your mother has a weakness for pretending everything is perfect. They have borrowed from me for years. They will try to borrow from you. Do not let them. There is a reason I left your share outside the trust. Ask to see the ledger, the blue one. I kept it in the storage unit, in the box with your grandfather's medals. Be brave. You were always the brave one, even if they made you feel small. Love, Grandma." I read it twice, then 3 times. The blue ledger. My heart was pounding in my ears. This wasn't just about my sister needing rent money. This was about a history. They have borrowed from me for years. I closed the notebook. I had my instructions. I wasn't just a beneficiary anymore. I was an investigator. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to apologize for it. The assault began on Wednesday morning, and by Friday afternoon, it had evolved into a full-scale siege. My phone became a device of torment, vibrating across my desk at work with a relentless rhythm that made my stomach turn. It was not a chaotic attack. It was coordinated, a synchronized dance of pressure that my family had perfected over 3 decades. First came my father. He called during my lunch break, his voice pitched in that calm, resonant baritone he used when he wanted to sound like a captain of industry. He did not yell. He did not plead. He spoke with the assumed authority of a man who believes his logic is the only logic that exists. "Sarah," he said, "I have been looking at the tax implications of the distribution. If we move the funds directly to Claire's venture, we can classify it as a family investment vehicle. It saves everyone money. It is just good business." He used words like vehicle and allocation to dress up what it really was, a donation. When I told him I needed time to review the estate documents, he didn't argue. He just let out a short, sharp sigh, the auditory equivalent of checking a watch. "I understand you feel the need to be cautious," he said, "but opportunities have expiration dates. Real-world business moves fast. Sarah, try not to let your fear paralysis cost the family this win." Then came my mother. Her strategy was less corporate and more visceral. She didn't care about tax shelters. She cared about loyalty. She called me while I was driving home, weeping softly before she even said hello. "I just was looking at old photos of you and Claire." She sobbed. "You two used to hold hands everywhere. Do you remember? You wouldn't let anyone else push her on the swing. You were her protector." "Sarah." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I remembered pushing her on the swing. I also remembered that when she fell off because she let go of the chains, I was the one grounded for not catching her. "I am not trying to hurt her." "Mom," I said, staring at the red taillights in front of me. "Then help her," she whispered. "That is what love is. Love is action. Grandma would be so heartbroken to see you hoarding this money while your sister suffers." And finally, there was Claire. Her messages were a whiplash-inducing oscillation between sisterly affection and bitter resentment. Voice note, 1:10 a.m. "Hey, saw this cute scarf and thought of you. Miss your face. Let's get coffee. I want to show you the plan." Voice note, 2:20 p.m. "Mom said you are still stalling. I don't get it. Do you want me to fail?" Is that it? You want to be the only successful one so you can feel superior. Voice note 3:40 p.m. Sorry, I am just stressed. I love you. Please, Sarah. This is my last shot. It was a pattern I knew in my bones. The reasonable authority, the emotional guilt, and the victim. They triangulated me, closing off every exit until the only door left open was the one where I wrote the check. In the past, I had always walked through it. I had paid the bail, covered the rent, smoothed the feathers, but this time, I had a notebook, I had a list, and I had $45,000 that stood between me and ruin. I agreed to meet Claire for coffee on Thursday evening. I needed to see this business opportunity with my own eyes. We met at a trendy spot downtown, the kind of place where the espresso machine looked like a steam engine and the menu was written in chalk by an artist. Claire was already there, sitting at a corner table. She had a tablet propped up in front of her and was aggressively typing on her phone. When she saw me, she shoved the phone into her purse and plastered on a smile. "Sarah," she chirped. She stood up to hug me. She felt thin, fragile, like a bird that had forgotten how to fly. "I got you a vanilla latte, oat milk, just how you like it." I sat down. "Thanks." She tapped the screen of her tablet. "Okay, I know you have questions. Mom and Dad said you were being diligent, which is good. Due diligence is key. So, I prepared a deck, my sister, whose last job had been walking dogs for a cash-only agency, had a pitch deck. She swiped through the slides. The graphics were sleek. High-resolution stock photos of women doing yoga on mountains, calm minimalist interiors, and words like synergy and holistic modality floating in sans serif fonts. The title slide read, "Lumina Mobile Wellness, a Future of Motion." "It is a mobile studio," Claire explained, her eyes bright and manic. "We bring the wellness to the corporate client. Massage, meditation, mindfulness coaching. We retrofit a luxury van. I drive to the office parks. I set up in the parking lot or the break room. It is low overhead, high margin." It sounded, theoretically, like a real business, but as she swiped to the financials, the illusion cracked. I looked at the revenue projections. "Claire," I said, pointing to the screen, "this says you are going to make $12,000 a month in the first quarter. Conservative estimate," she said quickly. How I asked, "How much are you charging per session?" "We work on a retainer model," she said. "Companies pay a subscription. Do you have any subscribers?" "We have leads, warm leads." I looked at the bottom of the slide. Total initial capital required $50,000. "And who is this?" I asked, pointing to a box on the team slide labeled Strategic Partner. There was no name, just a silhouette of a head. "That is the investor," Claire said. "He is bringing the expertise. He knows the retrofit guys. He has the connections to the corporate HR departments." "What is his name?" Claire hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. Her eyes darted to the left. "He prefers to stay silent until the funding is secured. He is very high level. He doesn't want his name attached until we launch." I sat back, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "Claire, who built this deck?" "I did," she said defensively. I looked at her. "Claire, you still type with your index fingers. You didn't build this." Her shoulders slumped. "Okay, fine. A consultant built it. But it is my vision." I told him what I wanted, and he made it look professional. "A consultant," I repeated. "How much did you pay him?" She bit her lip. "It is an investment package. He does the deck, the LLC filing, the branding." "How much?" "Claire." $5,000. She mumbled. I nearly choked on my latte. $5,000. You paid someone $5,000 for a PowerPoint presentation. "It is a reservation fee," she insisted, her voice rising. "It locks in my territory. If I don't pay the rest of the capital by the end of the month, I lose the fee and the territory." "And where did you get $5,000? I asked. Though I dreaded the answer, "I used the emergency card," she said, looking down at her hands, "the one Dad co-signed." I stared at her. The picture was becoming clear. She was $50,000 in the hole or about to be for a business that consisted of nothing but stock photos and a territory that didn't exist. "I need the inheritance. Sarah," she whispered, "to pay the rest. If I pay the full amount, the van gets delivered next week. Then I can start making money. I can pay everyone back." "What is the consultant's name?" I asked. "Or the company name, Prestige Ventures," she said. "But why does it matter?" I pulled out my phone. I didn't care about being rude. I typed Prestige Ventures into the search bar. Nothing. Generic results. "What about the guy?" "What is his name?" "Jason," she said. "Jason Vane." I typed Jason Vane business scam. The results populated instantly. Rip-off report. Jason Vane, formerly of Elite Path Consulting, Reddit thread. "Has anyone heard of visionary mobile startups? I paid a reservation fee and never got the van." Civil court case. 2022. CV049. Plaintiff versus Vane. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. It wasn't just a bad idea, it was a grift. And my sister was the mark. "Claire," I said softly. I turned the phone around and slid it across the table. "Look." She glanced at the screen, then shoved the phone back at me. "I don't want to see that. Haters. Every successful person has haters. Claire, he is being sued for this exact thing. There is no van." "There is a van," she shouted. People turned to look at us. She lowered her voice, hissing. "I saw pictures of it. He sent me a video walkthrough. A video can be faked," I said, "or it can be a video of a van that he sells to 50 different people." "You are just jealous," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "You want me to stay the loser sister. You want me to be broken so you can feel big. I am trying to save you from losing $50,000. I said, "It is not your money," she snapped. "It is Grandma's money. She would want me to have a chance." She grabbed her tablet and shoved it into her bag. "I am leaving. If you don't want to help, fine. But don't poison this for me." She stormed out. I watched her go, leaving her half-drunk latte on the table. I looked at the dark liquid. It was just like everything else in our family, sweet, frothy, and completely unsubstantial. Sunday dinner was mandatory. In the Russell family, absence was treated as an act of treason. I arrived at my parents' house at 5 o'clock. The house smelled of pot roast and furniture polish. The scent of my childhood. My father was in the living room watching golf with the volume turned low. My mother was in the kitchen, aggressively chopping carrots. Claire was there, sitting on a bar stool at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up when I walked in. We sat down to eat at 6. The table was set with the good china, a bad sign. It meant this was a formal negotiation. My father carved the roast. My mother spooned gravy. For 10 minutes. The only sound was the clinking of silverware against porcelain. Finally, my father wiped his mouth with his napkin and set it down. "So," he said, "we have been doing some thinking." I kept eating. "I am listening. We understand your hesitation," he said. "You want security? That is natural. You have been through a rough patch with the divorce." I tightened my grip on my fork. Rough patch. As if my husband cheating on me and draining our joint savings account was a weather event. "We have come up with a compromise," he continued. He reached under his chair and pulled out a leather portfolio. He extracted a single sheet of paper and slid it across the tablecloth. I looked at it. It was typed on plain white paper, no letterhead. Agreement. Sarah Russell agrees to lend the sum of $45,000 to Claire Russell for the purpose of business startup costs. Repayment shall occur as business revenue permits. Robert and Linda Russell agree to oversee the repayment process. There were 3 lines for signatures at the bottom. It was laughable. It wasn't a contract. It was a napkin scribble dressed up in Times New Roman. "What is this?" I asked. "It is a loan agreement," my mother said, smiling brightly. "So you feel safe. We are guaranteeing it. Sarah, we will make sure she pays you back." I read the second line again. "As business revenue permits. And if the business doesn't make revenue," I asked. "It will," Claire said sullenly. "But if it doesn't," I pressed. "Does this mean I don't get paid?" My father sighed. "Sarah, You are getting hung up on negatives. We are family. We are not a bank. This paper is a formality to show you we are serious. I looked at my father. Dad, if this were a business deal between strangers, would you sign this? He stiffened. This is not strangers. This is your sister. I want a promissory note. I said, I want a fixed interest rate. I want a repayment schedule with specific dates. And I want collateral. The room went dead silent. My mother dropped her fork. Collateral, Claire whispered. Like my car. Like anything that has value. I said, if I am the bank, then I need to act like a bank. Isn't that what you said? Dad. Be pragmatic. My father's face turned a shade of red I rarely saw. It started at his collar and crept up his neck. You are being insolent, he said. His voice was low, dangerous. I am being an adult. I said, I investigated Claire's consultant. He is a fraud. Dad, he is being sued in 3 counties. If I give her this money, it is gone. He is not a fraud, Claire shouted. You are a liar. He is a strategic partner. My mother added, though she looked confused. I looked at my father. He didn't look surprised about the fraud. He looked annoyed that I had found it. We will vet the consultant, he said dismissively. That is our job. Your job is to fund the family. My job, I said, standing up, is to protect myself. Because nobody else in this room is going to do it. Sit down. Sarah, my father commanded. No, I said, I am not signing this. And I'm not giving Claire the money for a phantom van. I walked out of the dining room. I heard my mother crying before I even reached the front door. The next day, I took a personal day from work. I couldn't focus on spreadsheets. My mind was a loop of the dinner, the shouting, the silence. I needed to feel close to the only person who had ever made sense to me. I drove to the self-storage facility on the edge of town. Grandma had rented a small unit there years ago when she downsized to the condo. It was set to be closed out with the estate, but Mr. Hemlock had given me the key code and told me to take anything of sentimental value before the auction crew came. The unit was 5 by 5, smelling of dust and dry cardboard. It was filled with the detritus of a long life boxes of holiday decorations, old coats, stacks of National Geographics. I moved a tower of hat boxes and found the plastic bin marked Important Papers. I sat on the cold concrete floor and opened it. It was mostly tax returns from the 80s and appliance manuals, but at the very bottom, beneath a stack of knitting patterns, was an accordion folder. It was blue, the blue ledger. My hands trembled as I undid the elastic cord. Inside, there were 3 sections. The first section held bank statements, not recent ones, but old ones, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The second section held correspondence, letters from my father to his mother. Dear Mom, things are a little tight this quarter with the inventory expansion. If you could see your way to releasing $10,000 from the trust, I would appreciate it. We will treat it as a bridge loan. Dear Mom, Claire's tuition is due and the market is down. We need another disbursement. I flipped through them. There were dozens. Bridge loans, tuition, cars, vacations masked as educational trips. They had been bleeding her dry for decades. The third section contained a thick, leather-bound notebook, the ledger itself and a sealed envelope. The envelope was marked, For Sarah Only. Do not open until I am gone. This was different from the note Mr. Hemlock had given me. That was a goodbye. This felt like a briefing. I tore it open. Sarah, if you found the blue folder, you know the truth. They have treated the family trust like a personal checking account. I tried to stop it, but your father has a way of making me feel like I am the one failing him. I am tired of fighting them, but I want you to be safe. There is a document they will try to make you sign. They call it a release or a waiver of accounting. They will tell you it is standard. They will tell you it saves legal fees. Do not sign it. If you sign it, you lose the right to ask where the money went, and a lot of money went places it should not have gone. Look at the ledger. Look at the entry for August 2015. Love, Grandma. I opened the leather notebook. It was a handwritten record of every withdrawal my grandmother had authorized and some she hadn't. I found August 2015. August 14th, 2015. Withdrawal. $22,000. Notation. Robert. Emergency tax liability. August 20th, 2015. Note. Robert purchased new boat. The Sea Spirit. I felt sick. My father had claimed he was in tax trouble, taken $22,000 from his mother, and bought a boat he sold 2 years later at a loss. I flipped through more pages. It was a chronicle of theft. Claire's study abroad, that was actually a rehab stint. My mother's home renovation that paid off credit card debt, and in the margins, my grandmother's shaky handwriting, he promised to pay this back. He never did. I put the ledger in my bag. I felt heavy, weighted down by the sheer volume of their deceit. They weren't just bad with money. They were predators, and their prey was the woman who had given them everything. I called Mr. Hemlock from the car. I need to understand the trust. I said without preamble, Ms. Russell. He said, I was about to call you. Grandma mentioned a trust. The 1998 trust. Yes, he said, the majority of the estate flows through that trust. The cash bequest to you was a carve-out, but there is also a residual distribution. You are a beneficiary of the trust itself, along with your sister and your father. And does the trust have rules, I asked, about prior withdrawals? It does, he said slowly, and it requires a full accounting. The trustee in this case, your father, is required by law to provide a record of all assets and disbursements to the beneficiaries before the final distribution can be made. Unless the beneficiaries waive that right, he said. It is common practice in families to sign a waiver to speed things up and avoid paying an accountant. A release, I said. Yes, a release and indemnification. If I sign that, I can't ask about the money he took for the boat. Can I? There was a pause. You know about the boat. I know about a lot of things. Mr. Hemlock, if you sign the release, you are essentially stating that you are satisfied with the trustee's management and you release him from any liability for past actions. You close the door on the past. I am not closing the door. I said, I am kicking it open. Ms. Russell, he said, his voice dropping. If there is evidence of improper commingling of funds, this could get very ugly. This stops being probate and starts being litigation. I don't want to sue my family. I said, then you have a difficult road ahead, because if you demand the accounting, you are effectively accusing your father of misconduct. He accused me of being selfish. I said, I think I can live with accusing him of math. That evening, the pressure reached its peak. I was sitting on my living room floor, surrounded by photocopies of the ledger pages I had made at the library, organizing the timeline. My phone rang. It was Claire. Pick up. Sarah. I answered. Hello? Claire? You have to sign it, she screamed. She sounded hysterical. Sign what? The loan. The agreement. Or just tell Dad you agree. Why, I asked. Because the meeting is tomorrow. The investor meeting, Jason called me. He said if I don't have proof of funds by noon tomorrow, he is giving my territory to someone else. Everything collapses. Sarah. I closed my eyes. I could picture her pacing around her apartment, terrified, manipulated by a con artist and a father who needed her to be the distraction. It was a manufactured crisis. The deadline was fake. The territory was fake. The urgency was a weapon designed to bypass my logic and hit my adrenaline. Claire, I said calmly, there is no territory. Stop saying that. You are ruining my life if you don't help me tonight. I will never forgive you. I mean it. Sarah. Dad is furious. He said you are dead to him if you let me fail. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't guilt. It was the sudden, cool absence of both. I realized that their threats only worked if I wanted their approval, and looking at the ledger pages scattered on the floor, the proof of their parasitism, I realized I didn't want their approval. I didn't want to be part of a club that required an entry fee of my own self-respect. Then it collapses. I said. The silence on the other end was absolute. What she whispered, If the deadline is tomorrow and I am saying no, then it collapses. I said, I am sorry, Claire, but I am not doing it. You can't. I just did. Good night. I hung up. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb. My heart was beating slow and steady. I felt lighter. I went to my computer to check my email, intending to send a note to Mr. Hemlock formally requesting the trust accounting. There was a message in my spam folder. It was from an address I didn't recognize. Watcher1955 protonmail.com. The subject line was, "Your parents are not telling you the truth about the trust." I clicked it open. There was no text in the body of the email, just an attachment. It was a blurry photograph. It looked like it had been taken in haste, maybe with a phone camera under bad lighting. It was a page from a ledger, but it wasn't the blue ledger I had found. It was a different document, a modern spreadsheet printed out. I zoomed in. January 2018, tuition remittance, Claire Russell, $14,000. January 2018, MISCI reimbursement, Robert Russell, $8,000. The handwriting in the margins of the printout was sharp, angular, and all caps. Sarah, do not disclose. I stared at the handwriting. It looked familiar. It looked like my father's handwriting, but distorted. Or maybe it was someone trying to write like him, or someone trying to hide their own handwriting. No. I looked closer. The R in Russell. It had a specific loop. It looked like my father's handwriting. But why would my father send me evidence of his own theft? He wouldn't. But someone with access to his files would. I sat back in my chair. The blue ledger from Grandma stopped in 2019. When she got sick, and my father took over power of attorney. This photo was from the gap years. The years when Grandma wasn't watching. I had the history. Now, I had a source on the inside. I wasn't just fighting for my $45,000 anymore. I was fighting for the whole truth. I replied to the email with 2 words. Who is this? I waited. No answer. I saved the image to my hard drive. I renamed the file evidence_1. I looked at the clock. It was midnight. The investor meeting was in 12 hours. The war had officially begun. The morning light in Mr. Hemlock's office was unforgiving. It cut through the blinds in sharp, dusty slats, illuminating the worn carpet and the piles of files that represented the quiet ends of other people's lives. I sat across from him, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking, while he studied the printout of the blurry photograph I had received the night before. He adjusted his glasses, then lowered the paper to the desk. He didn't look shocked. He looked weary. "Where did you get this, Sarah?" he asked. "It was sent to me anonymously." I said, "Last night." He tapped the image with a manicured fingernail. The line item was hard to read, but the context was clear enough. It showed a transfer of funds, a significant one. "It appears to be a ledger page from a private accounting system," he said carefully. "It references a temporary advance. The date is from 4 years ago." 4 years ago. I said, "That was when my father bought his new truck. The one he said he got a great deal on because of a trade-in." Mr. Hemlock leaned back. "Sarah, I must advise you, evidence obtained. Informally can be tricky. If we use this, we reveal that someone inside the circle is leaking information. That could cause the flow of information to stop. I don't care about the leak." I said, "I care about the truth. Is that legal? Can a trustee take a temporary advance from a trust?" Technically, he pursed his lips. A trustee can borrow from a trust if the trust instrument allows it, and if it is repaid with interest, but if it is not repaid, or if the terms are not market standard, it is not a loan. It is a breach of fiduciary duty. It is theft. I felt a cold verification settle in my chest. "What do?" I asked. "We stop guessing," he said. "We make it official. You authorize me to send a formal demand for a full trust accounting. We ask for 5 years of statements. We ask for every canceled check, every transfer receipt, and every promissory note. And if they refuse, then we petition the court to compel them." He said, "And we petition to have your father removed as trustee." It sounded so nuclear. Removed as trustee. My father defined himself by his control over the family finances. Taking that away would be like taking his name. Do it, I said. Mr. Hemlock nodded and made a note on his legal pad. I will draft the demand today. It will go out via certified mail and email. He looked up at me. Brace yourself. Sarah, when people are hiding things, they do not react well to flashlights. The reaction was not immediate. It took 48 hours. The exact amount of time it took for the certified letter to arrive at my parents' house. I was at work, sitting in my cubicle, trying to focus on a logistics report for a shipment of machine parts to Ohio. My phone was face down on the desk. It started buzzing at 10 in the morning. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again, a relentless, angry vibration that rattled against the laminate desktop. I finally picked it up. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. Then my mother called, then the house landline, a number they rarely used. I put the phone in my drawer and tried to work, but my heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew what was happening. The flashlight had been turned on, at noon. I walked out to my car to listen to the voicemails. The first one was my father. Sarah, call me immediately. I have a letter here from Arthur Hemlock. I don't know what you think you're doing, sending legal threats to your own father, but this stops now. Do you hear me? You are humiliating us. You are making a private family matter into a public spectacle. Call me. His voice wasn't the calm business voice he had used before. It was raw, shaking with a mixture of rage and panic. The second one was my mother. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. How could you? How could you do this? We have always done everything for you. We paid for your braces. We helped you move. And now you treat us like criminals. You are trying to destroy this family. Sarah, over money. It is sick. I sat in the driver's seat of my 10-year-old sedan and listened to them replay the greatest hits of my childhood guilt. Ungrateful, cold, selfish. But this time, the words didn't pierce me the way they used to. They bounced off, because I had the ledger. I had the truth. They weren't angry because I was wrong. They were angry because I was right. I didn't call them back. I texted Mr. Hemlock. They got the letter. He replied instantly, "Do not engage. Direct all communication to me." I drove back to work, but I couldn't focus. I felt like I was walking through a minefield. That evening, I was heating up a bowl of soup in my kitchen when the buzzer to my building rang. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the intercom. "Who is it?" "It's me," a voice cracked. "Claire." I hesitated. My sister was the last person I wanted to see. She was the weapon they used when guilt didn't work. But if I didn't let her in, she would stand outside and scream until the neighbors called the police. I buzzed her in. She looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen. Her makeup smeared. She was wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, a stark contrast to the fur and polish of our lunch meeting. She walked in and collapsed onto my sofa without taking off her shoes. "Why are you doing this?" she wailed. I stood by the door, arms crossed. Doing what? Claire asking for a receipt. "Mom hasn't stopped crying for 6 hours," she shouted, sitting up. "Dad is pacing around the house like a caged animal. He says you are suing him." "I am not suing him," I said calmly. "I am asking for an accounting of the trust. If he hasn't done anything wrong, it is just paperwork. He can print it out and send it. It is not just paperwork. It is an insult. You are telling him you don't trust him." "I don't trust him," I said, "and neither should you." She glared at me. "You are just jealous. You have always been jealous, because they help me and they don't help you." That stung. But I didn't show it. "They aren't helping you." "Claire," I said, "they are enabling you. There is a difference, and they are using Grandma's money to do it." So what? She snapped. "Grandma would have wanted me to be happy. Did Grandma want you to pay for your first wedding with the trust fund?" I asked. The room went silent. I had thrown it out as a guess, a hunch based on the timeline I had been building in my head. Claire's first wedding, a lavish affair at a country club when she was 23, had cost a fortune. My parents had claimed they paid for it from their savings, but the dates aligned with a dip in the trust assets I had seen in the blue ledger. Claire's face went pale. Who told you that? She whispered. My stomach dropped. I had been guessing, but she just confirmed it. Nobody told me. I said, but thank you for confirming it. She scrambled to backtrack. It wasn't like that. It was a loan from the trust. Dad said it was a loan. Did you sign a promissory note? I asked. Did you pay it back? I was 23, I didn't have any money. Dad said he would handle the paperwork. He said it was an advance on my inheritance. I stared at her. An advance on her inheritance. And now, 10 years later, they were asking me to give up my inheritance to fund her again. So, let me get this straight, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed anger. You got a $50,000 wedding paid for by the trust, and now you want my $45,000 for a fake business. And Mom and Dad are telling me I am selfish for wanting to keep the money Grandma left specifically to me. It wasn't $50,000, she muttered. It was $60. I laughed. A short, sharp sound that felt like a bark. $60,000. Get out. Claire. She looked up. Shocked. What? Get out of my apartment. Go back to Mom and Dad. Tell them I am not stopping the accounting. In fact, tell them I am more interested than ever. You can't kick me out. I am your sister. I opened the door. Goodbye. Claire. She stood up, pulling her hoodie tight around her. You are going to regret this. Sarah, you are going to end up all alone, and you will have your money, but you won't have anyone to spend it with. She walked out. I slammed the door and locked it. I leaned against the wood, breathing hard. She was right about one thing. I was going to be alone. But as I looked around my quiet, paid-for apartment, I realized that aloneness felt a lot like safety. The next day, I had an appointment I had made a week prior. It wasn't with a lawyer. It was with a financial counselor at a local nonprofit called Money Matters. I needed a reality check. I needed someone to look at my numbers who wasn't related to me and wasn't trying to bill me by the hour. The counselor was a woman named Elena. She had a kind face and an office that smelled of peppermint tea. I laid out my finances, my salary, my rent, the divorce debt, the car payments, and the inheritance. She typed everything into her computer. She didn't judge. She just nodded. Okay, Sarah, she said, turning the screen so I could see. Here's the reality. You are solvent, but you are fragile. She pointed to a red line on the graph. You have no emergency fund, she said. If you lose your job or get sick, you are in trouble within 30 days. This inheritance. It is your shield. It takes you from fragile to stable. She looked me in the eye. If you give this money away, she said, you are setting yourself back 5 years, maybe 10, with interest rates the way they are. I looked at the graph. It was just math. It wasn't emotional. It was addition and subtraction. My family says I don't need it. I said, they say I am the responsible one. Being responsible doesn't mean you don't need security. Elena said, in fact, usually, the responsible ones are the ones who need it most, because nobody else is coming to save them. I felt tears prick my eyes. They used my stability against me, because I paid my bills. They assumed I had infinite money, because I didn't cry for help. They assumed I wasn't drowning. Keep the money. Sarah, Elena said gently, it is not selfish. It is survival. I left her office feeling grounded. The fog of gaslighting was lifting. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't greedy. I was just a woman trying to build a life on a foundation that wasn't made of quicksand. That night, energized by the meeting with Elena, I decided to dig deeper. I went back to the county records website. I had looked at the probate filings, but I hadn't looked at the property records. I searched for my grandmother's name, Margaret Russell. A list of deeds and liens populated. Most were old. The mortgage on her house, paid off in 1990. But there was one entry that caught my eye. A lien filed 6 years ago. Claimant R. Holdings, LLC, debtor Margaret Russell, amount $12,000, status satisfied. I frowned. R. Holdings. My father's accounting firm was called Russell Associates, but his initials were R. Robert Russell. I searched the state business registry for R.R. Holdings, LLC. It was registered to an address in a strip mall 3 towns over. The registered agent was a lawyer I didn't know. But the manager listed was Robert Russell. My father had placed a lien on his own mother's house. Why a lien is usually placed when someone owes a debt. Had Grandma owed him money? Or had he manufactured a debt to secure a claim on the property? And then, I looked at the date. The lien was satisfied, meaning paid off. It was paid off 2 months after it was filed. I pulled out the blue ledger copies. I checked the dates. 2 days before the lien was satisfied. There was a withdrawal from the trust for $12,000. The notation read, home maintenance/repairs. The pieces clicked together. Sickeningly slick. He had filed a lien against her house, maybe for accounting services or some other fabricated cost, then used the trust money to pay himself off to satisfy the lien. He had washed the money. He took it from the trust, passed it through the house title, and put it in his pocket. It was money laundering. It was clumsy, small-scale money laundering, but that is what it was. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just borrowing. This was fraud. I picked up my phone. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to see if he could still lie to me when I held the evidence. I called him. He answered on the second ring. Sarah. His voice was wary. Dad, I said, I have a question. I am not discussing the trust. Sarah, talk to the lawyers. It is not about the trust. I lied. It is about Grandma's house. I was looking at old pictures, and I remembered she had that roof leak a few years back. Do you remember when that was? He hesitated. The roof leak. Why does that matter? I'm just trying to put together a timeline for the estate. I said, was it 6 years ago? Yeah, he said, sounding relieved to be talking about home repairs instead of embezzlement. Yeah, that sounds right. Terrible leak. Cost a fortune to fix. Who fixed it? I asked. Some local guy. He said, I don't remember the name. I handled it for her. Did you have to take a lien out on the house to pay for it? I asked. The silence on the other end was instant and absolute. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. What he said, his voice tight. I saw a lien record. I said, R.R. Holdings, $12,000. That was for the roof, right? He stuttered. It was a financing thing, bridge financing, to get the work done fast. The contractor needed cash up front. So R.R. Holdings is a contractor, I asked. It was an intermediary. Look, Sarah, I don't have the files in front of me. This is ancient history. It was 6 years ago. Dad, I said, and the trust paid off the lien. The trust pays for house maintenance, he shouted. That is in the bylaws. But the trust paid you. Didn't it? I asked. R.R. Holdings is you. He hung up. I stared at the phone. He hadn't denied it. He had panicked. He was lying from memory. He couldn't keep the stories straight because there were too many of them. The roof, the boat, the wedding, the investor. I sat in the dark, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the lien document. They weren't just bad with money. They were cannibals. They consumed everything around them to feed their own image. An hour later, my email pinged. It was Watcher1955 again, the subject line. He knows you know. I opened it. This time, the image was clearer. It was a high-resolution scan. Not a photo. It was a page from a different ledger. This one looked like a tuition statement from a private college. Claire's College. Student Claire Russell. Semester Spring 2011. Amount $18,000. Payment method. Check 4022. Trust. But below it, there was a handwritten note in the margin of the internal file. Allocate 50% to Sarah Russell account for tax reporting. I stared at it. They had paid Claire's tuition, but they had allocated half of it to me on the books. Why to split the tax burden? To make it look like the distributions were equal so the beneficiaries wouldn't complain. They had used my name to hide her expenses. There was a message in the body of the email this time. Sarah, do not disclose this yet. Let them lie on the official accounting first, then catch them. If you show this now, they will shred the rest. I replied, Who are you? The response came back in 2 minutes. Someone who got tired of watching. I looked at the email address again. Watcher 1955, 1955. That was the year my aunt was born. Melissa Russell. My father's older sister. The one who never came to Thanksgiving. The one my parents called unstable and difficult. I hadn't seen her in 10 years. I searched for her number. I didn't have it. But I knew where she lived, or where she used to live, a small town an hour north, near the state line. I took a chance. I replied to the email. Aunt Melissa. The cursor blinked. 1 minute, 2 minutes, then meet me at the Galaxy Diner off I-94. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., come alone. The Galaxy Diner was a chrome and neon relic that smelled of burnt coffee and diesel fumes from the nearby truck stop. It was the kind of place where people went to be invisible. I walked in at 6:55. The place was half empty, in the back booth. A woman was smoking an electronic cigarette, a cloud of vapor obscuring her face. I walked over. She looked like my father, but harder. The same sharp nose, the same deep-set eyes, but where his face was soft with easy living. Hers was etched with lines of resistance. She wore a denim jacket and no makeup. "Hello, Sarah," she said. Her voice was raspier than I remembered. "Aunt Melissa," I said, sliding into the booth. She stubbed out the vape pen and looked me up and down. "You look like your grandmother, around the eyes. You sent the emails," I said. She nodded. "I did. How I asked. How do you have access to his files?" She smirked, a small, grim twisting of her lips. "Your father is a creature of habit. He uses the same password for everything. Claire Bear 1. He never changed it, even after I left the firm. You worked at the firm I asked." "I didn't know that. A long time ago," she said. "Before the war. The war. The war over Mom's money." She said, "It started way before you were born. Kid, or at least, before you were old enough to notice." The waitress came over. Melissa ordered black coffee. I ordered the same. "So, tell me," she said, leaning forward. "Did you find the lien?" I nodded. R Holdings?" She laughed, a dry hacking sound. "Classic Robert. He thinks he is a genius. Shell companies, fake invoices. He learned it from his old boss, and he's been doing it to the family ever since." "Why didn't you stop him?" I asked. "I tried," she said. Her face hardened. 10 years ago, when Mom started getting confused. "I tried to take over the power of attorney. I tried to get an audit. What happened?" "They circled the wagons." She said, "Your mother, your father. They told Mom I was after her money. They told everyone I was on drugs. They isolated me. They cut me off from the grandkids from you and Claire." I remembered that. I remembered hearing whispers that Aunt Melissa was having a breakdown. "They gaslit you." I said, "They are pros." She said, "That is their superpower. They don't beat you with fists. They beat you with stories. They rewrite reality until you are the villain in your own life." She took a sip of coffee. "And now they are doing it to you," she said. "Because you found the money, I found the lack of money." I corrected. "Same thing." She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a manila envelope. She slid it across the table. "Here," she said. "What is this, more ammo?" She said, "It is the real trust ledger. From the years I was there, it shows the pattern. It shows that Claire isn't the problem. She is just the symptom. Your father uses money to control people. He breaks them, then he buys them. He did it to Claire. He paid for her mistakes so she would never learn to stand up. That way, she is always dependent on him." "And me?" I asked. "You?" she said, looking at me with something like pity. "You were the insurance policy. You were the one who didn't need maintenance, so they ignored you. Until they needed your share to plug the holes." I opened the envelope. It was thick with documents. "Why are you helping me now?" I asked. "Because Mom is dead," she said. And she knew. In the end, she knew. She called me. "Sarah." About a month before she passed, she did. "She told me she was leaving you the cash. She told me she hid the blue ledger for you." She said, "Melissa, watch over her. Make sure she reads it. I felt a lump in my throat. Melissa leaned in. Listen to me. Sarah, their greatest weapon is not the lawyers. It is not the guilt. It is the isolation. They want you to feel like you are the only one who sees the truth. They want you to feel crazy. I do feel crazy. I admitted. You aren't, she said fiercely. You are the only sane one in the asylum. But you have to be ready. Ready for what? For the scorched earth, she said. When they realize they can't manipulate you, they will try to destroy you. They will tell the extended family you are stealing. They will tell your friends you are unstable. They will burn the bridge while they are still standing on it. Let them burn it, I said. I am learning to swim. Melissa smiled. A real smile this time. Good, she said. Now, drink your coffee. We have work to do. We sat in the diner for 2 hours. She walked me through the documents. She showed me how to read the double entries. She showed me where the bodies were buried. By the time I left, I had a headache, but I also had a roadmap. I walked out to my car. The wind was cold, cutting through my coat. I checked my phone. I had a notification from my email. It was from Mr. Hemlock. Subject response from trustee. Sarah, we received a response from your father's attorney. They are refusing the full accounting. They claim it is unduly burdensome and harassment. They have offered a summary statement instead. I smiled grimly. Of course they refused. I texted Mr. Hemlock back. Refusal rejected. File the petition and add account for breach of fiduciary duty. We have the proof. I started the car. The engine rattled, but it turned over. I wasn't the quiet daughter anymore. I was the storm they had been brewing for 30 years, and I was just getting started. The aggression stopped as abruptly as it had begun, replaced by a silence that was somehow more unnerving. For 2 days, my phone didn't ring, no angry texts, no weeping voicemails. The sudden peace felt like the receding tide before a tsunami. Then came the invitation. It wasn't a demand this time. It was a request, delivered via a handwritten card on heavy cream stock, my mother's preferred medium for rewriting history. Dearest Sarah, we have all been under so much stress. Grief makes us say things we do not mean. Please, come for dinner on Sunday. No business, no talk of money. Just family. Claire is bringing a fresh start gift. We miss you. Love, Mom. I held the card, tracing the embossed monogram. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression. Grief makes us say things. Not, we are sorry. Not, we were wrong. Just a vague attribution of blame to an emotion, absolving them of intent. I showed it to Aunt Melissa, snapping a picture and sending it over encrypted chat, a precaution she insisted on. It is a trap, she texted back. They want to get you in the room to see if you will crack. Go if you want, but wear your armor. I decided to go, not because I believed in the reconciliation, but because I needed to see them. I needed to see if I could sit across from them and not feel the old, crushing need to please. I needed to test my new skin. I arrived at the house at 6 o'clock sharp. The driveway was swept, the porch lights were on, and the house looked like a spread in a lifestyle magazine. It was the stage set of my childhood, perfect, polished, and concealing rot in the foundation. My mother opened the door before I could knock. She was wearing a soft blue cashmere sweater and pearls. She looked fragile and eager. Sarah, she cried, pulling me into a hug that smelled of lavender and desperation. I am so glad you came. I stiffened but didn't pull away. Hello, Mom. Come in. Come in. Dad is in the den making drinks. Claire is just finishing up in the kitchen. I walked into the foyer. The house was warm, too warm. The thermostat cranked up to combat the Wisconsin chill. My father emerged from the den. He wasn't wearing his business suit. He was in corduroys and a flannel shirt, his approachable dad costume. He held a glass of scotch in one hand and offered me the other. Sarah, he said, his voice deep and warm. Good to see you. Hi, Dad. I shook his hand. His grip was firm, dry, and entirely devoid of the malice I had heard over the phone just days ago. It was a performance, I realized. We were all actors in a play called Everything is Fine. We moved to the living room. Claire came in carrying a tray of appetizers. She looked better than she had at my apartment, hair washed, makeup subtle. She was wearing a dress I recognized as one of her interview outfits. "Hi. Sis," she said, offering me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She set the tray down and picked up a small, wrapped box from the coffee table. "This is for you," she said, a peace offering. I took the box. It was light. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a silver picture frame. In it was a photo of the two of us from 20 years ago, sitting on the dock at the lake house, our legs dangling in the water. I felt a pang of genuine nostalgia. We had been close once, before the money, before the expectations, before the roles hardened around us like concrete. "Thank you, Claire." I said, "It is beautiful. I just want us to be sisters again," she said, her voice wobbling. "Not adversaries. I want that too." I said. My mother clasped her hands together. "See? This is what matters. Family. The rest is just noise." We ate dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, comfort food. The conversation was studiously benign. We talked about the neighbors. We talked about the weather. We talked about a television show none of us really watched. It was during dessert apple pie. Of course that the mask slipped. Just a fraction. My mother was pouring coffee. Her hand was steady, her smile fixed. "I was talking to Helen at the bank the other day," she said casually. "You know Helen?" "She handles the high net worth accounts." I nodded. "Alert. She mentioned there are some new products for inheritance management." My mother continued. "Very streamlined. I actually spoke to someone about getting your distribution redirected, just into a holding account, to save you the administrative hassle." I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. "Redirected?" I asked. "Just to keep it simple," she said, waving a hand, "so it doesn't get mixed up with your personal accounts. You know, with the divorce and everything. We thought it might be safer." I looked at my father. He was studying his pie crust with intense fascination. "When did you speak to them?" I asked. "Oh, a few weeks ago," she said. Before all this confusion." I put my fork down. A few weeks ago meant before Grandma died, or immediately after. They had planned to intercept the money. They hadn't just asked me for it. They had actively tried to rout it away from me before I could even touch it. "You tried to move my money." I said, "Without my permission." "It wasn't like that," my father said, looking up. "We were exploring options. We wanted to protect you from impulsive decisions." "Impulsive decisions," I repeated, "like paying off debt, like saving for retirement, like giving it to lawyers," he said, his voice sharpening. I looked around the table. The warmth was gone. The fresh start was a sham. They hadn't invited me here to reconcile. They had invited me here to see if I had softened enough to let them take the wheel again. "I am not impulsive, Dad," I said, "and I am not a child. The money comes to me. That is what Grandma wanted." "Grandma was confused," Claire burst out. "She didn't know what she was doing. She wrote that will when she was, she wrote that will 3 years ago." I said, "She was sharp as a tack." My mother reached for my hand. "Sarah, please, don't ruin this evening. We are just trying to help you." I stood up. "I think I have had enough pie." I said, "Sarah, sit down," my father commanded. The approachable dad was gone. The CEO was back. "No," I said, "I am going home. Thank you for the frame. Claire, it is a nice memory." I walked to the door. My mother followed me, fluttering like a wounded bird. "Sarah, don't go like this. We love you." I turned at the door. "If you loved me, Mom, you wouldn't be trying to steal from me." I walked out into the cold night air. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, hard clarity settling in my gut. They weren't my family anymore. They were my opponents. 2 days later, I met with the forensic CPA Melissa had recommended. His name was David, and he worked out of a small office that looked more like a detective agency than an accounting firm. He was bald, bespectacled, and had the intense focus of a man who found joy in spreadsheets. I laid out everything I had. The blue ledger copies, the blurry photos from Watcher 1955, the official inventory Mr. Hemlock had provided. David went through them in silence for 20 minutes. Finally, he looked up. "You have a mess here," he said. "But it is a very specific kind of mess." "What kind?" I asked. "The kind that happens when people think nobody is watching," he said. He pointed to a series of entries in the blue ledger. "See these loans, advances, temporary allocation. These are red flags. In a trust, a loan to a trustee is almost always a violation unless it is explicitly permitted by the trust instrument and market terms are applied." He pulled up a calculator. "If we look at the frequency," he said, "it correlates with external events, tuition cycles, tax deadlines, vacation seasons. This isn't investment strategy. This is a piggy bank." He tapped the photo of the MISKI reimbursement. "And this is mischaracterization. Labeling a personal expense as a reimbursement is tax fraud. Plain and simple. If the IRS saw this, your father would be in a world of hurt." "Can we prove it?" I asked. "We can if we get the source documents," he said. "The bank statements, the canceled checks. That is why the accounting is crucial. If the numbers on the official accounting don't match the bank records, that is the smoking gun." He leaned back. "Sarah," he said, "you need to be prepared. If we find what I think we will find, your father isn't just going to lose his trustee status. He could lose his license. He could face criminal charges." I swallowed hard. "Criminal charges? I don't want to put him in jail," I whispered. "You might not have a choice," David said. "Once you pull the thread, the whole sweater unravels. But remember, you didn't knit the sweater." He did. The official acknowledgement of my request for an accounting arrived on a Tuesday. It was a dry legal document from my father's attorney, confirming receipt of the demand. But 2 hours later, another letter arrived. This one was different. It was on the letterhead of a firm I didn't recognize, Vanguard Associates. R.E. Cease and Desist / Harassment of Robert and Linda Russell. I opened it, my hands shaking. "Dear Ms. Russell, we represent your parents in this matter. It has come to our attention that you have been engaging in a campaign of harassment and defamation against our clients. Your repeated demands for accounting are baseless and are being used as a tool to inflict emotional distress. Furthermore, your allegations regarding the misuse of funds are slanderous. We demand that you immediately cease all such communications and withdraw your petition for an accounting. Failure to do so will result in legal action against you for defamation of character." I sat at my kitchen table, reading the words over and over. Harassment, slander, legal action. Panic flared in my chest. They were suing me. For asking for a receipt, I grabbed my phone to call Mr. Hemlock. But as I dialed, I looked at the letter again. Something was off. The tone was aggressive, but generic. Generic template tone. It sounded like something downloaded from the internet. And then I looked at the attachment. It was listed as Exhibit A Evidence of Harassment. But the attachment wasn't an email from me. It was a scanned copy of a property tax bill for a house in a different county. I frowned. I took a picture of the letter and sent it to David. "The CPA. Look at the date." He texted back a minute later. I looked. The letter was dated January 12, 2024. It was January 2025. They didn't even change the year, David wrote. "And that firm Vanguard Associates, I checked them. They are a reputation management firm, not a law firm. They send scare letters for a flat fee." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was a bluff, a cheap, sloppy bluff. They were trying to scare me into submission with a form letter. My fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard anger. They thought I was stupid. They thought I would see a letterhead and crumble. I forwarded the email to Mr. Hemlock with a note. "Add this to the file." The next day, Claire called. She didn't scream this time. Her voice was low, conspiratorial. "Sarah, can we talk? Just for a second?" "What is it, Claire?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. "Look, I talked to Mom and Dad. They are freaking out about this legal stuff. It is costing them a fortune in fees. They made an offer. An offer, Claire took a breath. If you drop the accounting request, I will split the inheritance with you. I blinked. Split the inheritance. What do you mean, I asked. The inheritance is mine. Claire, all of it. I know, but look, if you just stop this, Dad says he will match whatever you give me. So if you give me 20, he will give you 20. You come out ahead. I closed my eyes. They were trying to bribe me with my own money. And worse, Claire was negotiating. She wasn't asking for help anymore. She was brokering a deal to protect the system that fed her. Claire, I said slowly, do you realize what you are saying? You are asking me to take a payoff to cover up Dad's theft. It is not theft, she hissed. It is just complicated. Why do you have to be so rigid? Because it is wrong. Claire, she sighed, a sound of pure frustration. Fine, be a martyr. But don't come crying to me when you have nothing. She hung up. I realized then that she was gone. The sister I remembered, the one I pushed on the swing, was buried under layers of entitlement and denial. She was part of the machinery now. Mr. Hemlock called me on Friday. We got the first batch. He said, the records. Some of them. It is incomplete. There are missing months. April 2018. August 2020. December 2022. Missing, I asked. Omitted. He corrected. The trustee claims those records were misplaced during an office move. I laughed. Of course they were, but, Mr. Hemlock continued, what we do have is interesting. I see a pattern of transfers to an entity called RR Services, RR Holdings. I said, exactly, and the amounts correlate with the dates of the advances you saw in the blue ledger, so we have them. We have enough to escalate. He said, missing records are not automatically proof of wrongdoing, but when a trustee loses specific months that align with suspicious activity, the court tends to draw an adverse inference. What is the next step? We demand the missing records. If they can't produce them, we ask the court to surcharge the trustee. Basically, we make your father pay back every dollar he can't account for. I nodded. Saturday morning. I went back to the storage unit. I needed to clear my head, and sorting through Grandma's things felt like a way to be close to her. I was going through a box of old greeting cards when I found a file folder tucked into the back of a photo album. It wasn't labeled. I opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, yellowed with age. It was a typed note, signed by my grandmother, dated 5 years ago, to my attorney. My son, Robert, has asked me to sign a document releasing him from liability for the trust management. He says it is for tax purposes. I have refused. I do not trust his numbers. If anything happens to me, show this to counsel. I did not sign. I stared at the signature, Margaret Russell. She had refused. She had stood up to him, and because she refused, he had waited. He had waited until she was gone. And now he was trying to get me to sign the same release. She had left me the map. She had left me the weapon. I put the note in my purse. This was the final nail. I was driving home when I saw my father's car. He was parked in front of my condo building. He was leaning against the hood, arms crossed, wearing his casual weekend clothes. My heart jumped into my throat. I pulled into the alley behind the building and parked. I walked around to the front. He saw me and straightened up. Sarah, he said. He sounded calm, unusually calm. Dad, what are you doing here? I want to talk, he said. No lawyers. Just us, father and daughter. We are past that. Dad, we are never past that, he said, taking a step toward me. I am your father. I gave you life, and you tried to take my livelihood. I said, stepping back. He stopped. His eyes were cold. Despite his smile, Sarah, this has gone too far. You are listening to people who don't know us. Melissa, that accountant, they are poisoning you. They are showing me the math. Dad, math doesn't have an agenda. He sighed. Look, I made mistakes. I admit that. Business was tough. I borrowed, but I always intended to put it back. Intended. I said, but you didn't. You took it. You took Grandma's money. You took Claire's tuition money and hid it under my name. Who told you that?" he snapped. "It doesn't matter." I said, "I know." He looked at the building door, then back at me. "Let me come in. We can work this out. I can explain the accounting. I can show you why it looks the way it does." "No," I said. "Sarah, open the door." "No." He took another step. His face was flushing red. "You are being a foolish girl. You are going to lose everything." "I am not a girl," I said, my voice steady, "and I am not opening the door." I walked past him to the entrance. I punched in my code. He lunged for the door as I opened it, but I was faster. I stepped inside and pulled it shut. It clicked locked. He stood on the other side of the glass. He pressed his hand against it. "Sarah," he shouted, "open this door." I looked at him. He looked small, distorted by the glass. He wasn't the titan of industry anymore. He was just a desperate man who had run out of lies. I turned my back on him and walked to the elevator. I felt terrified. My legs were shaking so hard I could barely stand. But I also felt something else, power. I had said no, and the world hadn't ended. That night, I sat at my computer. I wasn't going to wait for Mr. Hemlock to draft another polite legal letter. I needed to say this myself. I opened a blank document. I didn't write a long, emotional diatribe. I didn't write about my feelings. I wrote about facts. Notice of demand and preservation of records. To Robert Russell, Trustee, from Sarah Russell, Beneficiary. 1. I hereby demand a full and complete accounting of the Russell Family Trust for the period of 2015 to 2025, including all bank statements, canceled checks, and promissory notes. 2. I demand the immediate production of the missing records for April 2018, August 2020, and December 2022. 3. I am in possession of evidence regarding the mischaracterization of funds, including the RR Holdings lien and the tuition allocation. 4. You are hereby notified to preserve all records. Any destruction of documents will be treated as spoliation of evidence. 5. Cease all personal contact with me regarding this matter. All future communication must go through my attorney, Arthur Hemlock. I printed it out. I signed it. It was a single piece of paper, but it weighed a ton. It was the line in the sand. It was the end of the family pot. It was the end of being the good daughter. I put it in an envelope. I would have Mr. Hemlock serve it on Monday. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. I was alone in my apartment. I was alone in the fight. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't lonely. I was free. Monday morning in a law office has a specific smell. It smells of toner, stale coffee, and the impending friction of human conflict. I sat in the leather chair across from Mr. Hemlock, watching him slide a stack of papers across the mahogany desk. "This is the final draft," he said. His voice was devoid of the hesitation I felt in my own gut. "We have incorporated your demand for accounting, the notice to preserve records, and the statutory citations regarding fiduciary duty. It is not a suggestion anymore. Sarah, it is a cannonball." I looked at the document. It was thick, stapled at the corner. The paper stock heavy and expensive. The title page read, "Formal Demand for Accounting and Preservation of Evidence. R.E. The Russell Family Trust." It cited statutes I had never heard of. It referenced deadlines 10 days to respond, 30 days to produce. It used words like malfeasance and personal liability. It was the paper I had drafted in my head, but refined into a weapon by a man who did this for a living. "Mr. Hemlock uncapped a black pen and set it down on top of the document. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Once we send this, we cross the Rubicon. There is no going back to Sunday dinners after this." I picked up the pen. My hand felt cold. I thought about the dinner I had just endured, the fake warmth, the fresh start frame, the casual attempt to divert my money before I even touched it. I thought about the lien on Grandma's house. I thought about the years of being told I was the selfish one while they cannibalized the family future. "I am ready," I said. I signed my name, Sarah Russell. The ink looked dark and permanent against the white page. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me, hot and sour, but beneath it, there was something else, a strange, vibrating calm. It was the calm of a controlled demolition. I wasn't waiting for the building to fall on me anymore. I was pushing the plunger. Mr. Hemlock took the document back. I will have this couriered this afternoon. We are also sending a copy to the probate court to go on the official record. Thank you. Arthur, I said. I walked out of his office and into the gray light of the parking lot. I sat in my car for a long time, just breathing, waiting for the fallout. It didn't take long. The courier must have arrived at my parents' house just before 5 o'clock. At 5:15, my phone lit up. It was my mother. I didn't answer. I watched the screen glow and darken. Glow and darken. Then came the text. It was a block of gray bubbles that filled the entire screen. I cannot believe you would do this. To send a sheriff to our door to threaten your father with court. We gave you life, Sarah. We sacrificed everything for you girls. And this is how you repay us. You are so cold. You have always been cold. But this is cruel. You are punishing us for being parents. You are punishing us for trying to help your sister. I hope the money keeps you warm at night because you have frozen everyone who loves you out of your life. I read it once. To send a sheriff. It was a courier, not a sheriff. But my mother lived in a world of dramatic hyperbole. You are punishing us for being parents. No, I was punishing them for being thieves. In the past, I would have typed a furious response. I would have explained, defended, apologized, begged them to understand. I would have tried to manage their emotions. Instead, I took a screenshot. I opened my email app and attached the image. I sent it to Mr. Hemlock with the subject line, Correspondence from Trustee's Spouse. Then I put my phone in my bag and drove to the grocery store. I bought apples, yogurt, and a bottle of wine. I didn't cry. The part of me that used to cry over them had calcified. 2 days later, Mr. Hemlock forwarded me an email from the trustee. The tone had changed. The bluster was gone, replaced by a terse, bureaucratic chill. Mr. Hemlock, receipt of your demand is acknowledged. The trustee disputes the allegations of impropriety but will comply with the request for a beneficiary meeting to review the preliminary accounting. The meeting is scheduled for next Tuesday at 10 in the morning at the offices of the trust administrator. Attendees: Robert Russell. Trustee: Sarah Russell, beneficiary. Claire Russell, beneficiary. I stared at the name, Claire Russell. I called Mr. Hemlock. Why is Claire going? I asked. I thought the trust distribution was just for me and Dad. Mr. Hemlock hummed on the other end of the line. That is what the will implied regarding the specific cash bequest. But the trust itself. The underlying vehicle. If Claire is listed as a beneficiary, she has a right to be there, but why now? I asked. She wasn't involved in the probate discussions. My guess. Mr. Hemlock said, they are bringing her as a shield. Or perhaps she is more involved in the trust structure than we realized, if she has been receiving distributions for years. She is technically an active beneficiary. She is a witness. I said, a hostile one. Prepare yourself. Sarah, he said, they are going to try to outnumber you. They want you to feel small in that room. I don't feel small anymore, I said. I hung up and called David, the forensic accountant. I need a timeline. I said, I need to see it all in one place. I met him at his office the next day. He had cleared a whiteboard and taped up the printouts I had given him, the blue ledger pages, the anonymous blurry photos, the public records of the lien. Okay, David said, uncapping a red marker. Let's look at the rhythm. He drew a line across the board, 2015 to 2025. Here's the lien on the house, he said, drawing a mark at 2019. $12,000. R. Holdings. Now, look at this, he said. He tapped a date on his laptop. I ran a background check on Claire's rental history. She was evicted from an apartment in Chicago in, wait for it, 2019. the same month I asked, 2 weeks prior. David said, the eviction notice was filed. Then the lien was filed on Grandma's house. Then the trust paid RR Holdings. Then, presumably, RR Holdings paid Claire's landlord. He drew a red arrow connecting the events. Now, 2018, he said. The tuition payment, $18,000. But look at the notation in the blurry photo. Allocate 50% to Sarah Russell account. Why, I asked. Why use my name? Because of the gift tax exclusion, David said. In 2018, the annual exclusion was $15,000 per person. If your father gave Claire $18,000, he would have to file a gift tax return. But if he said he gave $9,000 to Claire and $9,000 to you, no paperwork, no IRS red flags. My jaw tightened. He used my identity to dodge taxes on money he gave to her. It gets better, David said, or worse. 2022. The temporary advance of $22,000. The boat. I said, maybe, David said, but look at this. He pulled up a news article on his tablet. Local yoga studio sued for unpaid wages. The owner. A partner of Prestige Ventures. The same scam company Claire was currently dealing with. She has been involved with them before I asked. It looks like she tried to buy into a franchise 3 years ago. David said, and failed. The timing of the temporary advance matches the settlement date of that lawsuit perfectly. I sat back, staring at the whiteboard. It was a map of my family's pathology. Every time Claire fell, my parents panicked. They raided the trust to save her. But they couldn't admit they were raiding the trust. So they invented lies, liens, advances, tax splits using my name. They weren't just enabling her. They were breaking the law to keep her from facing reality. And they were using my grandmother's legacy and my name as the fuel. David looked at me. Sarah, this isn't just a few bad receipts. This is a decade of systematic looting, and the fact that they used your name to cover the tracks that makes you a victim of identity fraud. Technically, I took a picture of the whiteboard. Print it out. David, I said, make it a chart. I want to walk into that meeting with a map. That evening, I was going through the last of the papers from the storage unit. There was one folder I hadn't looked at closely. It was a collection of charitable pamphlets. Grandma's Causes, the Humane Society, the Library Fund, but clipped to the back of a brochure for the Haven Foundation, a local charity that helped women rebuild after domestic abuse and divorce, was a letter. It was addressed to the estate executor. Memorandum of Wish. It was titled, I, Margaret Russell, desire that upon the distribution of my estate, a donation of $5,000 be made to the Haven Foundation. However, this donation is contingent upon my granddaughter, Sarah Russell, receiving her full cash bequest of $45,000 without contest or diminution. If Sarah's share is reduced or diverted, this charitable gift shall be void. As I will not have my estate support strangers if it cannot first protect my own. I read it twice, my vision blurring. Grandma had built a failsafe. She knew they would try to take it. She knew they would pressure me. So she had tied a charitable gift, something that made the family look good. Something my mother would love to brag about at her garden club, to my safety. If they stole my money, they killed the donation. And knowing my mother, she had probably already told people about the generous gift the family was making to the foundation. She loved the optics of philanthropy. If I exposed this, I wouldn't just be reclaiming my money. I would be exposing them as people who would rob a battered women's shelter to pay for their daughter's mistakes. It was a moral trap, and they had walked right into it. I scanned the letter and sent it to Mr. Hemlock. Add this to the pile. I typed, I didn't expect Claire to reach out again. I thought she was done with me. But on Sunday, 2 days before the big meeting, she texted, Can we meet 5 minutes? Please, I am downstairs. I looked out my window. She was standing on the sidewalk, looking up at my building. She wasn't wearing the fur coat. She was wearing a denim jacket and hugging herself against the wind. I went down. I didn't let her in the building. We stood in the lobby. separated from the warmth of my apartment by a pane of security glass and my own resolve. "Sarah," she said. Her voice was brittle. "What is it?" "Claire, I wanted to explain. About Jason. The investor I asked." She nodded. She looked down at her boots. "He isn't who I thought he was. I waited. I told him about the delay." She said, "About you wanting the accounting. I thought he would understand. I thought he would wait. And he got scary. Sarah, he started yelling. He said I was useless. He said my parents were the only smart ones in the family because they knew how to handle assets." I felt a chill. "He praised them. He said they understood leverage." Claire whispered, "He said he had been talking to Dad." "Talking to Dad," I repeated. "You were manipulated." "Claire," I said, "but you also participated. You tried to take my money. I was desperate." "We are all desperate," I snapped. "I have debt too. I have fear too. But I don't steal from you." "I am not stealing," she cried. "I just wanted a chance." I took a deep breath. "Claire," I said, "I am going to say this once. I am not your funding source. I am not your safety net. Dad is not your safety net. He is broke. Claire, he is robbing Peter to pay Paul. And you are Paul." She looked at me, her eyes wide and wet. "He isn't broke," she whispered. "He has the firm. He has the house. He has a shell game." I said, "And the music is stopping." She wiped her face with her sleeve. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a flash of that old, defensive malice. "You are enjoying this, aren't you?" she said. "You love seeing us fall." I shook my head. "No, I hate it. But I'm not going to fall with you." She stepped back toward the door. "You are going to regret this," she hissed. "When the meeting is over, and Mom and Dad never speak to you again, you are going to be so cold. Sarah, you will see. You can't buy a family." She pushed through the lobby doors and walked out into the street. I watched her go. She was right. I couldn't buy a family, but the family I had was trying to sell me. Monday brought the final attempt at a plea bargain. My father didn't come to the building this time. He sent an email. "Sarah, let's stop the bleeding. If you withdraw the demand for accounting and sign the release, your mother and I are prepared to offer you a personal repayment plan. We will pay you the full $45,000 over a period of 5 years. Monthly installments of $750. We will sign a note. We can't give you the lump sum right now. The liquidity isn't there, but we give you our word. Please, don't let strangers look at our books." That line hit me. The liquidity isn't there. The liquidity isn't there. They had admitted it. The money was gone. My inheritance, the cash Grandma had left specifically for me, outside the trust, had already been spent. They had likely spent it months ago, anticipating they could bully me into signing a release after she died, and the offer $750 a month. For 5 years, it was an insult. It was an unsecured loan to people with a documented history of default. I forwarded the email to Mr. Hemlock. They admitted the funds are gone. I wrote, "This is admission of commingling and dissipation of assets." Mr. Hemlock replied in 10 minutes. "This is the smoking gun. Sarah, they just handed us the case. Do not reply." I didn't reply. I printed the email and added it to the folder for the meeting. Tuesday morning, the sky was a bruised purple, threatening snow. I dressed in my most severe suit, navy blue, high collar. I pulled my hair back tight. I wanted to look like the auditor my father accused me of being. Mr. Hemlock met me in the parking lot of the building where the meeting was to be held. It wasn't a law office. It was a small, nondescript building that housed an insurance agency and a notary public. The sign on the door read, "Henderson Financial Services." Mr. Hemlock checked his notes. "The trustee." "Who is Henderson?" I asked. I did some digging. "Mr. Hemlock said, "Frank Henderson. He was your father's college roommate. He is a licensed insurance broker, but he is acting as the administrative trustee, a buddy." I said, "A crony." Mr. Hemlock corrected, "He is not independent, and we are going to use that." We walked in. The conference room was small and smelled of stale donuts. My parents were already there. sitting on one side of a laminate table. Claire was next to them, looking down at her lap. At the head of the table sat a man with a red face and a comb-over that was fighting a losing battle. He wore a polo shirt with a golf logo. "Mr. Henderson, I presumed." "Sarah," my father said. He stood up, smiling as if this were a birthday party. "Come in. Sit down. No need for all the formality. Mr. Hemlock stepped in front of me. "Good morning, Mr. Russell," he said. "I am Arthur Hemlock, counsel for Sarah Russell. We will be maintaining all formalities today." My father's smile vanished. He sat down. I took the seat opposite them. I placed my thick folder on the table. The sound of it hitting the laminate was heavy. Thud. "Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Okay. Well, folks, let's keep this friendly. We are all family here. Bobber, Mr. Russell asked me to facilitate this little chat to clear up some confusion about the estate distribution. Mr. Hemlock opened his briefcase. "Mr. Henderson," he said, his voice sharp, "before we begin, I must ask for your conflict of interest disclosures." Henderson blinked. "My what? You are the administrative trustee, correct? You owe a fiduciary duty to all beneficiaries equally. Are you, or have you ever been, a personal associate of Robert Russell?" "Well, we go back," Henderson mumbled. "We play golf. And have you ever had business dealings with our holdings?" "Mr.?" Hemlock asked. Henderson's face went a shade redder. "That is, I don't see how that is relevant." "It is highly relevant." "Mr. Hemlock said, "if you have facilitated financial transfers for the trustee that are now subject to dispute, you are not a neutral party. You are a potential co-conspirator." My mother gasped. "Mr. Hemlock continued, "Relentless. We are prepared to petition the court for your removal as trustee and for the appointment of a court-ordered receiver, unless, of course, you produce the full records today." Henderson looked at my father. "Bob, you said this was going to be a simple sign-off." "It is simple," my father insisted. "Sarah is just... she is confused." I spoke up for the first time. "I am not confused." "Dad," I said. I opened my folder. I pulled out the timeline David had made. The chart with the red arrows, the dates, the eviction, the lien, the investor settlement. I slid it across the table. "I know about the lien. Dad, I know about RR Holdings. I know about the tuition allocation in 2018. And I know you spent my $45,000 before I even walked into this room." My father looked at the chart. His face went gray. Claire leaned over and looked at it. She traced the red line to the eviction date. Her eyes widened. "You paid the landlord," she whispered to Dad. "You told me you fought him in court and won." I handled it." My father stammered. "He paid him with Grandma's money." I said, "And he put a lien on her house to cover the withdrawal." My mother started to cry. Soft, keening sobs. "Stop it," she wailed. "Stop looking at papers. We are a family. We are a crime scene." "Mom," I said. My phone buzzed in my pocket. And then again, and again. I glanced down. It wasn't my parents. It was a text from my Aunt Patty. Then my cousin Mike. Then my father's sister in Florida. "Sarah, I heard what you're doing. How could you sue your own father? Your mom is heartbroken. Shame on you. Money isn't everything. Sarah, call off the lawyers." They had launched the social assault while we were sitting in this room. My mother, or perhaps my father, before we walked in, had sent out the signal. They were trying to shame me into silence by weaponizing the extended family. I looked at the texts. Then I looked at my parents. They were looking at me, waiting for me to break, waiting for the social pressure to crack my resolve. They thought that if enough people called me a bad daughter, I would believe it, but they had forgotten one thing. I had the paper. I reached into the folder and pulled out the last document, the letter from Grandma, the one about the charity, the Haven Foundation. I didn't say anything. I just placed it on top of the timeline. I slid it toward Mr. Henderson. "Read the condition." I said. Henderson picked it up. His lips moved as he read. "Contingent upon my granddaughter, Sarah Russell, receiving her full cash bequest." He looked up. "Bob, If the girl doesn't get her cash, the charity gets nothing. That is right, I said, and since Dad admitted in an email yesterday that the liquidity is gone, I looked at my mother. You are going to have to explain to the garden club why the donation to the battered women's shelter was canceled. Mom, and you are going to have to explain that it was canceled because you spent my inheritance. My mother stopped crying. She stared at me with pure horror. You wouldn't, she whispered. You wouldn't tell them. I won't have to. I said, the probate record is public. When we file the petition for the surcharge, it will all be there. The lien, the tuition, the charity. I stood up. Mr. Hemlock gathered his papers. We expect the full accounting by Friday. Mr. Hemlock said to a stunned Mr. Henderson, or we file. We walked out. I didn't look back. I could hear my father shouting at Henderson, and my mother sobbing, and Claire saying nothing at all. I walked to my car. My phone was still buzzing with hate mail from cousins I hadn't seen in 5 years. I turned the phone off. I was alone in the parking lot. The snow had started to fall, light dusting on the asphalt. I felt a profound, aching sadness for the family I had lost. But as I watched the snow fall, covering the gray world in white, I realized that I hadn't lost a family. I had escaped a cult, and I had the receipts to prove it. The conference room was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Chicago. It was a neutral ground chosen by Mr. Hemlock to strip my parents of their home court advantage. There were no family photos here, no smell of pot roast, no comfortable sofas where my mother could weep into a throw pillow. There was only a long, polished mahogany table that reflected the gray city sky, and chairs that cost more than my first car. The atmosphere was polite in the way that a loaded bear trap is polite before it snaps. My parents and Claire sat on one side. My father wore his best navy suit, the one he saved for weddings and funerals, and he had a small American flag pin on his lapel. My mother was dressed in black, as if she were mourning the death of her reputation. Claire sat between them, looking small and terrified, her hands twisting a paper napkin into a tight white rope. I sat on the other side. To my right was Mr. Hemlock, arranging his files with surgical precision. To my left was David, the forensic CPA, who had his laptop open and a projector humming softly on the table. At the head of the table sat Mr. Henderson, the trustee. He looked far less comfortable here than he had in his own office. The sterile corporate environment made his comb-over and golf shirt look amateurish, exposing him for what he was, a small-time player caught in a major league stadium. Mr. Hemlock cleared his throat. The sound was sharp, cutting through the low hum of the ventilation system. Thank you all for coming, he said. We are here to review the administration of the Russell Family Trust and to address specific concerns regarding the distribution of assets to the beneficiaries. My father leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. Arthur, he said, using the attorney's first name with a familiarity he hadn't earned. We are happy to clear this up. I know Sarah has been anxious. We want to put her mind at ease so we can all move forward. He smiled at me. It was a tight, practiced smile. Mr. Hemlock didn't smile back. We are not here for reassurance. Mr. Russell, he said, we are here for arithmetic. He nodded to David. David tapped a key on his laptop. A timeline appeared on the projection screen on the far wall. It was the same chart we had built in his office, but cleaner, sharper. A timeline of 10 years. David stood up. He didn't look at my parents. He looked at the screen. This timeline represents the liquidity events of the trust from the year 2015 to the present, David said. His voice was dry, factual. The blue bars represent standard distributions. The red bars represent irregularities. He pointed to a cluster of red bars in 2019. In August of 2019, a withdrawal of $12,000 was made to an entity listed as R.R. Holdings, David said. The notation in the ledger lists this as home maintenance. However, public records show that R.R. Holdings is a limited liability company managed by Robert Russell. My father shifted in his seat. That was a reimbursement. he said quickly. For the roof, I paid the contractor personally, and the trust reimbursed me. That is standard practice. David clicked to the next slide. This is a lien filed against the property of Margaret Russell by R.R. Holdings in the same month. David said, if the trust reimbursed you, Mr. Russell, why was a lien necessary, and why was the lien satisfied by a second withdrawal from the trust 2 weeks later? My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Henderson. Henderson looked at the ceiling. David continued, in January of 2018, a check for $18,000 was issued to a private university. The notation in the internal file says, allocate 50% to Sarah Russell. Yet Sarah Russell was not a student at that university. Claire Russell was. My mother gasped softly. She looked at me, her eyes wide with betrayal, as if I were the one revealing secrets rather than the one discovering them. This is a pattern, David said, turning to face the room. Over the last decade, approximately $140,000 of trust assets have been diverted to cover the personal expenses of one beneficiary, Claire Russell, or the business debts of the trustee Robert Russell. These transfers were disguised as loans, maintenance costs, or misallocated gifts. The silence that followed was heavy. It felt physical, like the air pressure dropping before a tornado. My father stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. This is outrageous, he said. His face was flushing a deep, angry red. You are cherry-picking data to paint a picture of theft. It was not theft. It was family management. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Sarah, you know how hard it has been. You know Claire needed help. You know the business had dry spells. Grandma knew. She wanted us to use the money to survive. It was all one pot. We helped who needed help, Mr. Hemlock spoke without standing up. If Grandma knew, Mr. Russell, why did you have to hide it? I didn't hide it, my father shouted. I managed it. I moved things around to minimize taxes, to keep the cash flow moving. That is what a trustee does. Mr. Hemlock opened a folder in front of him. He pulled out a single sheet of yellowed paper. I recognized it immediately. It was the note from the storage unit, the one Grandma had signed. If your authority was so clear. Mr. Hemlock said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Then why did Margaret Russell refuse to sign the release you presented to her 5 years ago? My father froze. He looked at the paper in Mr. Hemlock's hand. He recognized it too. Mr. Hemlock slid the paper across the polished table. This is a memorandum signed by Margaret Russell, dated May of 2021. Mr. Hemlock said, in it, she explicitly states that she refused to sign a waiver of liability for you. She states that she did not trust your numbers. And she instructs her heirs to show this document to counsel. My father stared at the paper. He didn't touch it. He looked like he was looking at a ghost. My mother started to cry, not the soft, manipulative weeping she usually employed, but a jagged, frightened sound. Bob, she whispered, you told me she signed it. You told me everything was handled. I told you what you needed to hear. My father snapped at her, his composure cracking down the center. I was trying to keep the lights on. I was trying to keep this family from going under. He turned to me. Sarah, look at me. I am your father. Yes, I moved money. Yes, I borrowed. But look at where we are. Claire is trying. The house is still in the family. We are still standing. Doesn't that count for anything? I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had walked me down the aisle at my wedding, who had told me my whole life that I was the sensible one. It counts, I said quietly. It counts as a lie. Mr. Hemlock wasn't done. He pulled another document from his file. This, he said, is a document we recovered from the Trust Administrator's digital archives. It is titled, Release and Indemnification. It is dated 2 weeks ago. He held it up. It is a draft. Mr. Hemlock said, prepared for Sarah Russell's signature. It contains language identical to the release Margaret Russell refused to sign. It waives all rights to an accounting. It releases the trustee from all liability for past actions. He looked at Henderson. Mr. Henderson, was it your intention to present this to Sarah Russell before distributing her cash bequest? Henderson stammered. It is a standard form. We use it for all beneficiaries. It is just boilerplate. It is a gag order. Mr. Hemlock said. And it proves that you knew there were irregularities you needed to bury. You were planning to hold her inheritance hostage until she signed away her right to ask questions. The room shifted. The polite veneer was gone. The narrative my parents had built that they were just a loving, messy family doing their best had collapsed under the weight of the paperwork. This wasn't love. It was a long con. I looked at the release document. It was the trap they had set for me. If I had signed that, I would have lost everything. I would have been complicit in my own robbery. I stood up. My legs felt steady. My hands were not shaking. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching the scene from a great distance. I loved Grandma. I said, my voice was not loud, but in the silence of the room, it carried. She was the only one who didn't ask me for anything. I continued, you all asked. You asked for my silence. You asked for my compliance. You asked for my money. You told me I was the strong one, the stable one. But you didn't want me to be stable. You wanted me to be a resource. I looked at Claire. She was staring at me, her eyes red and swollen. You called me selfish, I said to her, because I wouldn't fund a scam. But look at this chart. Claire, look at the red lines. You have consumed everything. You have eaten the house, the savings, the trust, and you are still hungry. I looked at my father, and you, Dad. You told me I was making it transactional. You were right. It is transactional. You took something that didn't belong to you, and now, the bill is due. I reached into my bag. I pulled out the document I had signed in Mr. Hemlock's office, the formal demand, the paper that David and Arthur and I had crafted into a spear. I slid it across the mahogany table. It hissed as it moved, stopping right in front of Henderson. This is my paper. I said. Henderson looked down at it. It is a formal demand for the production of all missing records, I said, reciting the words I had memorized, including the months of April 2018, August 2020, and December 2022. It is also a notice of preservation. If any document, digital or physical, is deleted or destroyed after this moment, I will file a motion for spoliation of evidence. I looked at Henderson. Mr. Henderson, where are the missing months? Henderson looked at the paper, then at Mr. Hemlock, then at my father. He looked like a man realizing he was the only one in the room without a life vest. He started. He loosened his tie. Look, Bob kept some records off-system. Off-system, Mr. Hemlock asked sharply. In a private ledger, Henderson admitted, his voice barely a whisper. He said it was for interim tracking. He sent me the summaries, but the source documents, he kept those. So you admit the official accounting is incomplete, Mr. Hemlock asked. Henderson nodded miserably. Yes, there are gaps. My father slammed his hand on the table. Frank, shut up. It is too late, Bob Henderson shouted back, his face shiny with sweat. She has the timeline. She has the lien. I am not going to jail for your boat. My father recoiled, as if he had been slapped. The mention of the boat, the frivolous, stupid boat that had cost $22,000 of Grandma's money hung in the air. Mr. Hemlock turned to my father. Mr. Russell, he said coldly, you have 24 hours to produce the private ledger. If you do not, we will petition the court to compel its production, and we will seek a surcharge against you personally for the full amount of the discrepancies. That includes the $140,000 identified today, plus legal fees. My father slumped in his chair. The fight went out of him all at once. He didn't look like a CEO anymore. He looked like an old, tired man who had spent his life juggling knives and had finally cut himself. He put his head in his hands. Claire spoke up then. Her voice was high and thin. I didn't know, she said. She was looking at me, pleading. Sarah, I swear, I didn't know about the liens. I didn't know about the boat. I asked for help, and Dad gave it to me. I never asked him to steal. I looked at my sister. I believed her. In a way, she was willfully blind. She never asked where the money came from because she didn't want to know. It was easier to believe in the magic of family help than to ask to see the bank statement. It doesn't matter. Claire, I said. It matters to me, she cried. I am not a criminal. You are a beneficiary of the crime. I said, you took the tuition. You took the rent. You took the bailouts. You benefited from a system that told me to sacrifice so you could be comfortable. But I am your sister, she sobbed. And I am yours. I said, but that didn't stop you from trying to take the last thing I had. I turned to Mr. Hemlock. Are we done? I asked. Mr. Hemlock nodded. We are done. We stood up to leave. My mother jumped up. She ran around the table and grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Sarah, wait, she pleaded. Her face was a mask of terror. Please, we can fix this. We can sell the lake cabin. We can pay you back. Just don't file the petition. It will ruin your father's reputation. Everyone will know. I looked at her hand on my arm, the hand that had smoothed my hair when I was sick, the hand that had pointed a finger at me and called me selfish. You can sell the cabin, I said. You probably should. You are going to need the money to pay back the trust. But the scandal, she whispered, the shame belongs to you, Mom. I said gently. I unpeeled her fingers from my sleeve. It isn't mine to carry anymore. I turned and walked toward the door. My father didn't look up. He was staring at the table, at the timeline that mapped his ruin. Claire sat frozen, staring at our parents. For the first time, she wasn't looking at them with expectation or need. She was looking at them with horror. She was seeing them not as her protectors, but as the architects of a disaster that had finally caught up with her. Mr. Hemlock opened the door for me. We walked out into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind us, muffling the sound of my mother's sobbing. We walked to the elevator in silence. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. You did well, Sarah. Mr. Hemlock said. I leaned back against the mirrored wall of the elevator. I felt exhausted, hollowed out, but I also felt light. The weight I had been carrying, the debt, the guilt, the obligation to fix people who didn't want to be fixed was gone. Left in that conference room on the 42nd floor. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait, he said. They will produce the records. They have no choice. Henderson is terrified. He will turn on your father to save his license. We will get a settlement. You will get your $45,000 and likely a significant portion of the trust restitution. And my family? I asked. Mr. Hemlock looked at me kindly. That part is up to you. He said, the law can fix the money. It cannot fix the relationships. I nodded. I knew the answer. There was no fixing this. The bridge hadn't just been burned. It had been revealed to be a hologram all along. I walked out of the building and into the cold Chicago wind. Snow was falling harder now, swirling around the skyscrapers. I pulled my coat tight. My phone buzzed. A text from Aunt Melissa. Did you give them the paper? I smiled. I typed back. I gave them the paper. Good, she replied. Welcome to the other side. I put the phone in my pocket and started walking. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but for the first time in 33 years, the direction was entirely up to me. Thank you for listening to this story. Families are complicated, and sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones with the people who raised us. I know this was a heavy one, but I hope Sarah's strength resonated with you. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Drop your country or city in the comments below. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of justice, resilience, and sweet revenge, please make sure to subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel and let me know in the comments. Do you think Sarah should ever speak to her family again? Or was walking away the only choice? I read every thought you share. Until next time, stay safe and remember to read the fine print.